Can the witness please state her name for the record?
Hillary Rodham Clinton.
William Jefferson Clinton.
Is there any reason you were unable to provide truthful testimony in today's interview?
No.
I don't believe so.
Former President Bill Clinton and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton face off against a congressional committee in separate depositions on the Epstein saga. And we have some of the most fiery moments all caught on tape. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. By the way, if you're putting things out on social media, if you're into content creation, you might be wondering how we're able to share so many of these clips from all of these stories so quickly. Well, we use something called Opus Clip. This is an all-in-one AI editor that makes it so easy to cut, create, and upload videos across any platform. Through AI, Opus Clip generates B-roll, reframes footage, and it even cleans up audio. It is so easy. You just visit opus.pro/sidebar, you sign up, you upload, and in minutes you will have perfectly edited clips ready to go for TikTok, Shorts, Reels. Opus Clip is your one-stop shop. And having a tool like Opus Clip means that our producers can get you viral courtroom updates instantly. This is the most powerful tool there is to share ideas and edit like a pro. So go to opus.pro/sidebar to get a free week and then 50% off. Okay, so we have breaking news right now. We're trying to get this to you as quickly as possible. We were waiting for this, okay? The videotape depositions of former President Bill Clinton and his wife, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, in connection with the Jeffrey Epstein investigation. This was conducted by the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. They were conducted in Chappaqua, New York, where the Clintons live. Let me just tell you, this doesn't really happen that often. When Congress subpoenas you, you go to Congress, not the other way around, but this is a very unusual case, as you know. Such a rare kind of case. But also, seeing these depositions so quickly, having them released so quickly, also unusual. But again, this is a case, this is a story, this is an investigation about transparency. And remember why they are being questioned, okay? Aside from both of their names appearing multiple times in the Epstein files, right, the files that were released pursuant to the Epstein Files Transparency Act, as far as we can tell, by the way, there are no direct emails from either Bill or Hillary Clinton to Jeffrey Epstein or vice versa. But we already knew they were in his orbit. We already knew about this. Through other evidence like communications and travel records, we knew that the Clintons were connected to Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. More specifically, that Clinton had traveled with Epstein for purposes of humanitarian work with the Clinton Foundation in the early 2000s after Bill Clinton left the office of presidency. And remember, this is before Jeffrey Epstein was charged in 2006 in Florida and ultimately pled guilty in 2008 to the state charges of solicitation of prostitution, including with a minor. Now, the reports indicate that Clinton had traveled on Epstein's private jet at least 24 times. This is per reporting by outlets like the BBC. And by the way, a lot of this travel was actually set up through Ghislaine Maxwell, convicted sex trafficker, and Clinton's top aide, Doug Band. And to be clear, there is no evidence, nothing in the files, nothing that's been released that suggests the Clintons were aware of any illegal activities or were a part of any illegal activities on the part of Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell or had knowledge of Epstein's crimes. I just want to make that clear. And by the way, there was no evidence even that Bill or Hillary had visited Epstein's island. Now, having said that, a lot of this focus is on Bill Clinton rather than Hillary Clinton, right? I mean, remember, aside from the humanitarian work, you remember when photos were released, him in a hot tub, him getting a massage or back rub. So with that being said, the committee released the videotape depositions of both Bill and Hillary Clinton from last week. It's hours and hours worth of footage. We dissected to some of the more memorable parts of both of their testimonies on separate days, okay? Now, I've said this before, I'll say it again. I believe, okay, there is one thing to read about testimony. There's one thing to read the transcript of testimony. There is an entirely different experience actually seeing the testimony, the way somebody answers a question, the way they even respond, facial tics, body language. I think it's very, very important. Juries consider it all the time. Now, I'm not saying there's a jury here, but we're kind of like the jury, right? We're analyzing every aspect of this investigation. So to see the Clintons respond to these questions, I think adds element of value here, okay? Now, again, the House committee released both videos. Let's start with Hillary Clinton. This is her opening statement for the committee, and this is where she talks about a lack of transparency.
Let me be as clear as I can. I do not. As I stated in my sworn declaration on January 13th, I had no idea about their criminal activities. I do not recall ever encountering Mr. Epstein. I never flew on his plane or visited his island, homes, or offices. I have nothing to add to that. A committee run by elected officials with a commitment to transparency would ensure the full release of all the files. It would ensure that the lawful redactions of those files protected the victims and survivors, not powerful men and political allies. It would get to the bottom of reports that DOJ withheld FBI interviews in which a survivor accuses President Trump of crimes. It would subpoena anyone who asked on which night there would be the wildest party on Epstein's island. It would demand testimony from prosecutors from Florida, New York, and the Department of Justice about why they gave Epstein a sweetheart deal and chose not to pursue others who may have been implicated in his crimes. But that's not happening. Instead, you have compelled me to testify, fully aware that I have no knowledge that would assist your investigation in order to distract from President Trump's actions and to cover them up despite legitimate calls for answers. If this committee is serious about learning the truth about Epstein's trafficking crimes, it would not rely on press gaggles to get answers from our current president on his involvement. It would ask him directly under oath about the tens of thousands of times he shows up in the Epstein files. If the majority was serious, it would not waste time on fishing expeditions. There is too much to be done. This institutional failure is designed to protect one political party and one public official, rather than to seek truth and justice for the victims and survivors, as well as inform the public who want to get to the bottom of this matter. My heart breaks for the survivors, and I am furious on their behalf.
Now, I mean, it seems that the argument is she's referring to those in the Trump administration, right? People who appear in the Epstein files that are not being properly investigated in her view, like Howard Lutnick, former neighbor of Jeffrey Epstein, United States Commerce Secretary. And by the way, he's a bit controversial because there were communications that would suggest he really didn't cut off contact when he said he cut off contact with Jeffrey Epstein, but also really focusing on President Donald Trump, right, who appears multiple times in the files, has faced uncorroborated allegations of abuse within the files, which, by the way, we've talked about in prior sidebars. But I gotta call out this moment. Okay, so this is where Hillary Clinton finds out that someone took a photo of her during this deposition. Remember, it was reported that it was Representative Lauren Boebert, okay, Republican, who shared a picture of her with a conservative commentator. It was posted all online. It's a big no-no because the rules require no unauthorized video or photos of a closed-door deposition. Watch Hillary Clinton erupt.
You're showing me an email from someone who I don't recall knowing about a fundraiser that wasn't for me but was for Congresswoman Lowy. I have no information. Okay. I went to the fundraiser to support my friend Nita Lowy.
All right.
Excuse me, can I interrupt?
I have
There
another.
are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying from inside this room. Can you please advise me as to whether or not that's permissible and consistent with the rules, particularly given that we have asked for a public hearing? If there are photos that are being released of the secretary as she is testifying, can you please explain how that
I'm
can
done
occur?
with this. If you guys are doing that, I am done. You can hold me in contempt from now until the cows come home. This is just typical behavior.
We will go off the record.
Oh, for heaven's
So
sake.
I would like to understand how that's permissible.
Before the hearing was,
It doesn't
Excuse
matter.
me.
We all are abiding by the same rules.
I will take that down.
Yeah,
So
well,
I would like to take a break at this moment.
yeah,
and I'd like to have
I'm
a
done
conversation.
for now.
Go off the record. Go off the record.
Eventually, the testimony resumed. But now I want to move on to something else, okay? I think we all knew this was probably going to come up. Monica Lewinsky, the president's former affair, right? I mean, there's a lot that came up over this when you knew the Clintons were going to testify. And after they testified, the argument came up that people say, this is another example of Hillary Clinton addressing her husband's actions, this time with respect to Epstein. But there is an apparent connection that Republican Representative Nancy Mace is trying to make here between the two. And by the way, Nancy Mace has been quite vocal about the handling of the Epstein files and the need for further action. But take a look at this.
On December 19th, 1998, President Clinton was impeached on charges of perjury and obstruction of justice, which directly related to his extramarital affair with Monica Lewinsky. Is that correct?
Yes.
And your husband was impeached for perjury related to sexual behavior, correct?
I didn't understand what you said.
Your husband was impeached for perjury related to sexual behavior, his sexual behavior.
He was impeached for several reasons, and then was acquitted in the Senate.
And your husband flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane 17 to 26 times, correct?
He made several trips with different legs on the trip, as I recall.
But he flew on Jeffrey Epstein's plane
Yes, he
17 to
did.
26 times? Were you aware that Secret Service was dropped on some of those flights?
That is not my understanding.
Where they were not on some of those flights?
That is not my
So
understanding.
your understanding is that Secret Service was on all of the flights that President Clinton was on?
That is
with
my
Epstein?
understanding.
By this standard of behavior, multiple credible accusers, including Juanita Broderick, who alleged rape against your husband was disbarred in Arkansas, lost his law license before the Supreme Court, flew on Epstein's plane dozens of times, visited Epstein's island.
That is not true. That is absolutely untrue.
Well, there's documentation in the DOJ files. I'm not sure you're aware, your attorneys have told you, but Jeffrey Epstein told one of the victims to lie to investigators, to lie that Bill Clinton was ever on Epstein Island. I can provide that document to you.
We would like that document, please.
Okay,
Yeah, counsel,
I can do
because
that.
actually the files say just the opposite. Epstein himself denied he was.
These are FBI notes from an interview with a victim, and I can get you the victim number and the case number and the files. These are notes from a 302
If
interview.
you'd like those, are you going to provide those now?
That's not my line of questioning. She brought it up, but I have a
I'm
document I
sorry,
can give to
you're
you.
making a representation as to the facts.
I didn't enter anything as an exhibit.
But it's factually inaccurate.
No, I can give it to you later. I can go find the document, make copies of it, and give it to you this afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Okay. By your standard of pattern of behavior, according to documents released by the Department of Justice, your husband appears in photos in swimming pools, hot tubs, aboard Jeffrey Epstein's private plane with unidentified young women. We came here today and you told this committee that a pattern of behavior demands accountability, correct?
I said that I believe the committee should call anyone who had a substantial pattern and practice of contact with Jeffrey Epstein and his crimes before they came to light.
Does that include your husband?
And after they came to light. You're going to have a chance to question him tomorrow.
So I'll ask you again, by the standard you just set, in your own words just now, does this standard apply equally to your husband or only President Trump?
I have said that my husband has been subpoenaed. He will appear. He will answer your questions to the best of his ability. But there is no evidence whatsoever of any connection with Jeffrey Epstein's crimes. And I think that that will be obviously apparent in the questioning.
What makes you so sure of that then? I mean, he's photographed with.
Objection
no,
is to speculate on something that's not
Yeah,
evidence.
it is so speculative. I mean, swimming in a pool, sitting in a hot tub, there are millions of people who do that without any improper behavior or certainly committing any crimes. So I
Do you think most of the men are like your husband that did anything wrong by where they're being surrounded by young women, giving them massages on Jeffrey's private estate or private plane? Are they all innocent then?
You know,
Just
you
because-
are making assumptions in your questions that have not been proven and I don't believe are provable.
Okay, why did you wait 6 months to have this hearing today or have this testimony?
You know, I've answered that. I thought that given the way that other witnesses who were subpoenaed at the same time were being treated, that there was an unfair treatment of both my husband and myself. And I thought that, especially from my perspective, I had very little, if any, information to provide you, and that I could have done it in a sworn statement, and you could have moved on to depose somebody else who might have more information that would be beneficial to your
I have two more
investigation.
questions.
We'll get back to the hot tub a little bit later, but now I want to talk about Howard Lutnick once again. Again, the current United States Secretary of Commerce, who appears numerous times in the Epstein files. Again, was neighbors with Epstein, communicated with Epstein through emails. There is even a photo that may appear to be him with Epstein. Now, Hillary Clinton is asked about him, and watch what happens.
Did it
Preparation
concern you at
for the
all that
testimony.
Ghislaine Maxwell was heavily involved with people you knew and were close to?
I knew people that I knew her. Yes, that's true.
And you just shrugged, you didn't want to look into it or
You know,
have any
nobody,
question
you know,
about it?
until her crimes were revealed and she was indicted and tried and convicted, I don't think people knew very much about at all
And
what
then
she
how do
was
you know
doing.
Howard Lutnick?
I know Howard Lutnick because when I was senator on 9/11, the firm he headed, Cantor Fitzgerald, suffered the greatest loss of life. As I recall, something like 650 of his employees were murdered by terrorists that day. Howard Lutnick missed being a victim because he was delayed dropping
know
his
that. I
child
asked
off
him.
to
No.
kindergarten. You asked the question. I'm going to answer your question.
Now you're gonna yell
This
at
was
me?
what I spent
You're
my
going to yell at
time
me.
doing.
I'm a
I
survivor
spent
trying
my-
to look out for other
Well,
survivors, trying to
and
get to the bottom
I was
of it.
taking care
You
of
waited
the
6
people
months
who
to
lost
get here today.
3,000
6 months,
lives
and now you're being
at World
defiant
Trade
and
Center.
indignant today.
You asked me
I have
about
met
Howard
with Epstein
Lutnick.
survivors. I'm a survivor myself. You have emails. You've denied that Jeffrey Epstein, that you tried to get Jeffrey Epstein to give money to you.
I did
but
not.
Howard Lutnick was
If
used
you
to
have an
get
email
money.
with me asking Jeffrey
I
Epstein
have
for
an
money,
email from Howard Lutnick sending it to
what's
Jeffrey
the question?
Epstein and his
What's the-
people to
I
raise
don't-
money for
I don't
you
know about-
for an event, an intimate event for you at his offices
Well,
at Cantor Fitzgerald. You're
look,
going to sit
if
here
you-
today
if you would
and,
let me
and,
finish.
and obfuscate and say to this committee, you didn't try to get money from Jeffrey
I didn't.
Epstein when
I
there was
didn't.
an intimate event in an email that Howard Lutnick emailed to Epstein's people and Epstein to get him to come to your intimate event at Cantor Fitzgerald, a very small event. And so I'm not going to put it. You want to yell at me, that's fine, but I'll yell right back.
Well,
okay? I am looking out for
it's
survivors.
very-
I'm doing
look.
the job that you would not do and refuse to do as Secretary of State. Thank you, and I yield back to
no,
Congresswoman.
I'm going to finish answering the question, which I have a right to do. I am very sympathetic to your personal situation. I have read about it. I have seen you testify or speak on the floor about it. And I very much sympathize with not only what you went through, but appreciate your effort to stand up for survivors. I was a senator representing the people who were murdered on 9/11. Nobody lost more people than Howard Lutnick. You can say whatever you want. You can call him and have him appear before the committee. But
intend
I
to.
knew him as the man who lost the employees that he knew intimately, including his brother.
And he was a
So
double threat
I
between
work-
you and
Let
Jeffrey
her finish
Epstein
her
raising
answer,
money
please.
for you.
Let her finish her answer.
You know what? If you don't want to hear what emotionally affected me, that's fine. But that's why I know Howard Lutnick. I went to the memorial service every 9/11 after the formal service was held.
I see what you're
with
doing here,
all-
and you're
with
obfuscating
all
from
of
the
his
questions. He was the
people, the
go-between
families.
between you and Jeffrey Epstein raising money for your
Well,
campaign.
you know, Howard Lutnick and I did work
Thank you. I will
together
now yield
because
to
we had a lot of
Congresswoman Luna.
victims
Thank you.
to take care of, and we worked together to rebuild downtown Manhattan. That is how I know Howard Lutnick.
Why don't you want to get over here?
Fine, I'll do the heavy lifting.
You could like it later.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, now I want to go back to Lauren Boebert, who had this very interesting back and forth on this one. Now, you remember the 2016 conspiracy theory about Pizzagate? Mentioned this in a prior sidebar about references to pizza in the Epstein files, people making connections between the two. Pizzagate was the unfounded theory that you had this sex trafficking pedophile ring featuring prominent Democratic figures was being run out of a D.C. pizza shop. Boebert asks Hillary Clinton about this.
In past public statements, as in 2017 speeches and interviews, you described Pizzagate as a baseless conspiracy theory, alleging you and others ran a child sex trafficking ring from a Washington pizzeria basement. Have you reviewed any 2025-2026 Epstein files that were released that you believe reference or relate to those specific 2016 claims regarding the Podesta emails, Comet Ping Pong Pizza used as code possibly?
I'm sorry, does
You're
this
asking
relate?
her about whether
excuse me.
she's reviewed emails in the Epstein files was related to the wacky Pizzagate
You
scandal.
could characterize it however you want. I just would like to know if she's familiar with any of them.
So
She's
excuse me,
commenting-
your question is about whether or not she has reviewed any emails in the Epstein release files about Pizzagate.
Correct.
Pizzagate was totally made up. It was an outrageous allegation that ended up hurting a number of people, that caused a deranged young man to show up with his assault rifle and shoot up a local pizzeria. I can't believe you're even referencing it. You should be.
There are connections to the language.
Well,
I'm
the
not talking
QAnon
about-
people believe there are, so.
I don't know what QAnon
have at
people
it.
believe.
Have at it.
But you've accused certain parties, and I think even right now today, of promoting slow walking or information in ways that fuels conspiracies. In your view, did any Epstein-Maxwell related investigations or file handling pre or post 2019 contribute to or intersect with the spread of Pizzagate style theories about Democrat figures?
Objection.
I have
Calls
no
for
way
an
of answering. That is the
impossible amount of
most
speculation.
ridiculously.
Have you or your representatives identified any Epstein file content that has been misinterpreted online to revive those claims? And what steps, if any, have you taken to clarify?
Again, object on the ground of
I think that this is all very
speculation.
reasonable.
Well, first of all, I don't follow the crazy conspiracy stories that are online. I regret that anybody does. I find it quite sad, but also disturbing that people would believe some of what is put forth, like Pizzagate. So I have taken no steps to review anything
Do you think
that might
pizza-
have any connection to something which I think is totally bogus.
Next question, want to provide a little context here. So remember Anthony Weiner served in the U.S. House of Representatives, had to resign over claims he sent women sexually suggestive photos. Then there was the whole scandal of him texting a teenager. He was convicted of having sent obscene material to a child. He was released after 18 months in prison. Now, he was connected to Hillary Clinton because his then wife, Uma Abedin, had been an aide to Clinton. And during the investigation into Weiner, the FBI found emails belonging to Abedin on Weiner's laptop. And then that led FBI Director James Comey to announce that the FBI was reopening its investigation, its probe into Clinton's handling of official emails, and this was before the 2016 election. Guess what? She was asked about this in the deposition. Not happy.
Are you aware of any files that were on Anthony Weiner's laptop in a folder that was titled insurance, life insurance, with a zip file titled
Excuse me,
Frazzle?
I like the chairman's
This is
ru- no,
way
I like
outside
the
the
chairman's
scope.
ruling.
This is way
within the
outside the
scope?
scope.
Is this within the scope, Mr.
If
Chairman?
the chairman rules that it's not within the scope, I
Mr.
have
Chairman,
other
based on
questions.
what you said in the public hearing, is this within the scope?
We can go off the record for a moment. to
Mr.
confer
Chairman,
with
is this
Chairman.
within the scope?
We'll go off the record.
One more part I want to address real quickly regarding Hillary Clinton. Things got tense when she brought up Republican lawmakers.
You know, I also find it very interesting because I went back and looked at the transcripts of all of your other depositions, and none of the Republicans asked a single question to any witness about Jeffrey Epstein, or any question that would help provide answers for his victims to any of the people you deposed. In fact, the only questions that were asked by the chairman to Attorney General Barr. And what were they about? They weren't about Jeffrey Epstein. They weren't about Ghislaine Maxwell. They weren't about victims and survivors. They were, General Barr, I may jump in for a couple of questions. Were you aware of the involvement of Hillary Clinton and the Clinton campaign in the Russian collusion investigation involving President Trump?
A deposition of Ms. Clinton.
Well, I'm just saying, you have kept me here for hours asking the same questions over and over again. I've given the same answers over and
Madam
over again.
Secretary, we
Not
will-
a single Republican
give us
at
just a
any
moment.
of your depositions has asked a question about Epstein or Maxwell. And it does seem to me that if the members were truly interested in getting to the truth,
Madam Secretary,
you would have
I
asked
think you have an
Barr,
We are very
Acosta,
close to
Wexner, you
finishing.
didn't even show up
Madam
at.
Secretary, I believe we are very close to finishing.
Okay, now I want to talk about former President Bill Clinton's videotape deposition. Pretty historic to have a president testify under oath like this. Haven't seen it in decades, and particularly regarding this case.
On August 5th, 2025, Chairman Comer issued a subpoena for President Clinton to appear today for a deposition in furtherance of the committee's investigation into the actions and investigations of Mr. Jeffrey Epstein and Ms. Ghislaine Maxwell. Can the witness please state his name for the record?
William Jefferson Clinton.
Thank you.
And here is Bill Clinton's opening statement.
I'm here today basically for two reasons. First of all, I love my country and the Constitution, and I believe America was built on the idea that no one is above the law, especially presidents, and that we should all live by the same set of rules shaped by the Constitution. Democracy requires every person to play their part, and I hope that by being here today, we can bring ourselves a little further away from the brink and back to being a country where we can disagree civilly and search for the truth and justice, and that outweighs the partisan urge for spectacle and point scoring. I will do my part, and I hope you'll do yours. The second reason I'm here is that the girls and women whose lives Jeffrey Epstein destroyed deserve not just justice, but healing. They've been waiting too long for both. Through my brief acquaintance with Jeffrey Epstein, though it ended years before his crimes came to light, and though I never witnessed during our limited interactions any indication of what was going on, I'm here to offer what little I know so I can do my part to prevent something like this from happening again.
And I will tell you, he had some thoughts about his wife's deposition, too.
I have to just say one personal thing. Since Hillary came in yesterday, she had nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. Nothing. There's a picture of us both shaking hands with him in a photo line in 1993 at a fundraiser for the White House Historical Association. I don't know how it is under President Trump, but when I was there, it was about the most non-political operation you can imagine. There were people who loved the White House, who were interested in it, would give a little money every year to do things that needed doing around the house. And nothing nearly as extravagant as the ballroom or any of that, just things that had to be done. And neither she nor I remembered shaking his hand all those years ago. So I don't think that was right. On the other hand, I do think you should be talking to me. I think you should have called me. I did take those plane trips with him, and you have a right to ask those questions. So I'm glad to be here, and I understand what the oath is. I have to be honest with you. You know, I'll be 80 years old if I live to my next birthday. I don't remember everything that happened 24 years ago, but I do remember some things, and I will tell you what I remember as best I can. We, each of us, owe the victims nothing less than the truth and accuracy. We owe that to the American people.
Again, there is an argument that Hillary Clinton really wouldn't have much to provide or answer for with respect to Epstein or Maxwell, even though, by the way, Maxwell was a +1 at their daughter Chelsea's wedding. But it was really the focus was on Bill, right? It seemed that he had a lot to answer for. So this is where Bill Clinton talks about his first encounter with Jeffrey Epstein.
And you mentioned that your first memory of interacting with Mr. Epstein was on your first trip. Which trip specifically?
I'm not sure which one it was. Which one was the first? I took all or parts of 4 or 5 trips to Asia and Africa and one to Northern Europe on Mr. Epstein's airplane. And once when I was in Florida, I was offered a ride back to New York, but I wasn't there having it. It was just coincidental that he was there, and I think that was fairly early in the process, but I don't remember exactly. I just know that I did. I took one flight back from Florida to New York, and all are part of several other, I think 4 or 5 trips to Africa, Asia, and one to Northern Europe.
Then he gets more into the nature of his relationship with the deceased financier.
Can you briefly describe the nature and extent of your relationship with Mr. Epstein?
Well, sometime after I left the White House, either in late 2001 or early-ish in 2002, I received a call from Larry Summers, who had been on my economic team and was later Secretary of Treasury, and was then president of Harvard. And he said that he was calling because a man named Jeffrey Epstein, who had made a substantial commitment of several $1 million, I think it was 10, but whatever it was, I don't, to brain research. And that he was a information hungry person, and he wanted to spend some time talking to me about economics and politics. And he said, he's got this massive airplane, and he said he would take you, your staff, your Secret Service detail, anybody else you wanted to bring, on the trips that he knew I was planning to set up a global network to provide life-saving AIDS medicine to as many people as possible, as quickly as possible.
Mr. President, when did your relationship with Mr. Epstein end?
When did it end? Well, I believe I took my last flight in 2003. Now, later I became aware of some involvement he had in the first Clinton Global Initiative, but it was much later.
Why did your relationship with Mr. Epstein end?
Well, after a year or two, we really picked up a head of steam with this AIDS program, and a lot of other people whom I knew better and who really cared about the work came forward and offered to help us provide transportation. And I thought Mr. Epstein was an interesting man, but I didn't think he was really interested in what I was doing. That is, he asked all these questions. He did ask about economics and politics, as he said he would. And he never asked me anything untoward. It's just that I thought I had done what I promised to do, and he had done what he promised to do. And I thought I've always, over the years, with these donors, tried not to overstay my welcome. I thought that we'd done enough, and then it's time to start working with other people.
When did you first learn of Jeffrey Epstein's crimes?
I think in 2008 when he was prosecuted. There's nothing that I saw when I was around him that made me realized he was trafficking women, and I never.
Let's talk about Ghislaine Maxwell. When did you first meet Ghislaine Maxwell?
I believe I first met her with him when she was working with him.
And what did you understand Miss Maxwell, and what did you understand her relationship to be with Mr. Epstein?
I thought she was sort of his chief of staff or administrator.
And you said that you first met Miss Maxwell with Mr. Epstein. Is that after you were president?
Yeah, I don't believe I met her when I was president. I couldn't have. I met a lot of people, you know, I don't remember, but I definitely remember meeting her on that first flight.
Can you briefly, for the record, describe the nature and extent of your relationship with Miss Maxwell?
Yes, it was. It lasted longer and was more extensive than my relationship with Mr. Epstein, because Ghislaine Maxwell started going with a man named Ted Waite, who had made a lot of money making the first sort of self-designed computers. And he was a big supporter of mine and the foundation before he started seeing Ghislaine. We had been friends, and he was interested particularly in reducing pollution in the oceans. And so when she started going with him, I would see her from time to time.
And when did your relationship with Miss Maxwell end?
I don't think I've seen her in a decade. I don't know. It's been a long time. I don't know exactly when.
Why did your relationship with Miss Maxwell end?
Well, first she moved to Boston, I think. She had a relationship with a man there, and I think they may have married. And so she wasn't so much around, and then when it became, after 2019, when it became obvious that she was involved too, to an extent that I did not know, that was the end of it.
Now, while I mentioned the interaction with Epstein was before the criminal charges, right, in 2006, and then the guilty plea in 2008, Clinton is asked if authorities had reached out to him and whether Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell were part of intelligence agencies, right? This goes to the idea of the pair honey trapping very powerful and influential and wealthy men for blackmail purposes, right? Possibly for foreign governments.
Mr. President, for the record, have you ever been contacted by any law enforcement agency concerning Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell?
As far as I know, no. That is, as far as I remember. Back in 2008, I sort of thought somebody might ask me something, because I was glad this had come out since it had happened. But I don't believe anybody ever did.
You mentioned that you thought someone would want to ask you something. Can you elaborate on what that means?
Just because he let me use this airplane.
And to be clear, have you ever provided any information to any law enforcement agency concerning Jeffrey Epstein or Miss Ghislaine Maxwell?
So you asked this question before, you're just asking him to reiterate the response to the question that he previously asked you, Mr. President.
I don't believe any law enforcement agency has ever asked me. And I didn't know enough to volunteer anything.
Mr. President, are you aware of any efforts by anyone, including an attorney, process server, investigator, or any other person to contact you regarding any civil lawsuit, claim, or litigation involving Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell?
Not that I recall.
Did Jeffrey Epstein ever inform or represent to you that he was working with any intelligence service of any nation, including the United States?
No,
Did Ghislaine Maxwell ever inform or represent to you that she was working with any intelligence service of any nation, including the United States?
no,
And during your relationship, did you ever suspect Epstein or Maxwell of being affiliated with any intelligence agency?
I did not.
All right. Now, you know that the former president was going to be asked about massages and young girls, right? And also, by the way, he was asked about, we've talked about this before, remember Epstein's 50th birthday compilation book that was put together by Ghislaine Maxwell? There's an entry from Bill Clinton. It reads, "It's reassuring, isn't it, to have lasted so long across all the years of learning and knowing, adventures, and still to have your childlike curiosity, the drive to make a difference, and the solace of friends."
Okay, my next question for you is, have you ever had contact with an individual by the name of Shantae Davies?
I believe Shantae that's a distinctive name, and so I think that was the name of one of his flight attendants.
Okay. She's been described on being on a 2002 Africa trip and providing massages. Was she or any other young female on that trip underage at that time?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Did you ever receive a massage or have physical contact from her or anyone else on that trip?
You've seen the pictures. There was one time when I was sitting up and I got a back rub, a neck rub.
Okay.
And I think Shantae did it, but I'm not sure.
Okay. Did you ever visit Epstein's Little St. James Island?
No,
We have Virginia Guffrey, who has testified seeing you on the island with two young girls. Did this occur at all? Okay. Why do you think she would have made that claim?
Objection, speculation, he can't possibly.
Have you ever met her or any other Epstein associated underage girl?
not to my knowledge.
In Epstein's 2016 deposition unsealed in the DOJ files, he refused to answer if you were accompanied by two young women who were approximately 18 years old on the island. Were any such women potentially underage with you? I know you've stated that you were not there, but did you have any interaction with the said
Objection
individuals?
to the foundation of the question. He's already stated he was not on the island. You're now asking about a claim of the Fifth Amendment by Jeffrey Epstein.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to introduce what will be marked as Majority Exhibit 13. And this is Bates marked House Oversight 000126. And while it's being passed out, this is a letter from a book of letters, which was
it's his
compiled
50th birthday.
Jeffrey Epstein's 50th birthday.
Questions?
Yep,
Mr. President, do you recognize this
I do.
letter? And for the record, does this appear to be your handwriting and
It
signature?
is.
And why did you write this letter?
Why did I? Because I was requested to contribute a nice letter for his birthday book.
And who asked you to write the letter?
I don't remember.
Would Miss Maxwell have
I
asked you?
don't know. I think someone on my staff asked me.
Now, there's a word that our committee has not been able to identify, and in our defense, the Wall Street Journal has not been able to identify.
Imagine being on his staff.
Can you please read the letter for the record?
Yes. It's reassuring, isn't it, to have lasted so long across all the years of learning and knowing, adventures and errors, and still to have your childlike curiosity, the drive to make a difference, and the solace of friends. Not a bad letter.
And because we haven't been able to identify that word until now, what did you
Which
mean?
word was it that you could not?
Solace, you couldn't,
No, errors.
errors. What did I mean? Anybody who's lived 50 years and done anything has made mistakes as well as progress and done things.
But for the record, you weren't referring to errors in judgment that Mr. Epstein had related to his inappropriate activities involving young
Absolutely
girls.
not. I knew nothing about that.
And then we get to the hot tub photo.
What we're trying to get at is some context for the public on whether you remember this photo and any details you may be able to provide us about it. So do you recall the details of this photo or recall the photo being taken?
No, I don't think I ever knew the photo was taken.
Okay, and for those who can't see it, it's a photo of you in a hot tub. There's a person next to you here. Do you remember where it was taken? Where was it taken?
I'm almost sure that this pic, and I think there's an adjacent photograph, which you probably have, that if people saw it, they would feel that someone was trying to con them showing this picture. But anyway, this picture was taken in Brunei. And we flew one night on a trip to Asia, the last very long leg.
You said we, is it, who is that including?
Well, my TIL team that was working
Thank you.
on the AIDS issue, and Mr. Epstein was there, and Miss Maxwell. But anyway, we got to the end of the flight was Brunei. It's a tiny place, but a very wealthy one, and the Sultan of Brunei was a man that I had gotten to know well in my 8 years as president. He said he wanted to help me with my AIDS initiative, and he invited me to stay there. And he said, I want you to stay at this hotel, and I hope you'll use the pool. So I did, and then I got out and went to bed, exhausted.
Just for the record, there's another picture that also shows this as part of the larger pool area. Do you all have that so that he can refresh his recollection with respect to that?
You should have it. It's quite enlightening. If you watch this,
Yes, it's noted.
It'll
Yes.
give you a different feel.
Thank you.
Okay.
We don't have it with us right now.
Okay,
We do
thanks. I just
have
wanted
it
to
as
make
well.
sure he knew the
And so were there other people in that pool or hot tub with you as well?
I don't think there's anybody in the hot tub. I didn't forgotten that there was anybody in the hot tub, but it was big, but it was about.
Well,
He's asking in the pool
It appears
area.
this photo, there's a girl over here, or there's someone.
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
But he's also asking in the pool area were there other
Yes,
individuals?
I don't know who that is.
Okay, so you don't know?
No, and then there were other people in the pool.
Okay, so do you remember who, were they under 18? Would you
No.
know? No.
Were they part of your traveling party, he's asking you?
Yes, they were, I think. I think everybody there was part of our party. It was late at night or late-ish, and I also believe that there was a Secret Service agent there at the other end of the pool.
Okay, and was this in public?
No, it was a hotel room, and the Sultan wanted us to stay there, and the water, this big pool, was on the same floor that there were several suites, so we went out, I swam around, I sat in the hot tub for 5 minutes, or whatever it was, and I got up and went to bed.
And then I have to ask this, did you engage in any sexual activity
No.
with this person? Okay, thank you.
How about this one?
Virginia Giuffre is also asked in this document.
The same one you handed us?
Yes, ma'am.
So we should be looking at,
This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lines down. JS is speaking. Were sexual orgies a regular occurrence on the island at Jeffrey's house? Yes. My question, Mr. President, were you ever aware or engaged in any of these sexual orgies?
are these on the island where he's testified that he's
No,
not
ma'am,
been on the
I
island?
was never on the island.
Were you ever on any island in the Virgin Islands?
To travel for a trip with his wife, which is on the public record? I'm
With
sorry,
Jeffrey
what's your
Epstein?
question?
No,
You were never in the Virginia Islands,
in the Virgin Islands with Jeffrey Epstein, no.
Jeff.
And I got to say, the final one I want to talk about right now is very interesting. Did Jeffrey Epstein kill himself? You know, there's been a lot of speculation about that, even though it was officially determined Epstein hung himself in his jail cell at the MCC in August of 2019 while awaiting federal sex trafficking charges. Though the Epstein files, I will tell you, didn't quiet that conversation. When you look at the materials, I think it just continues the conversation one way or another. There were reports of a decoy body being moved out, or a missing minute of surveillance footage, or this orange blob moving up the stairs to Jeffrey Epstein's cell, to the actual photos of his dead body, to internal reports about Epstein's mental health leading up to his death. Just continued the conversation. Well, one of the theories is that Epstein was murdered, right? That he was killed, so he couldn't share what information he had with respect to other people or on other people. Former president was asked about this.
Mr. President, there's been new information that has come out regarding the autopsy of Mr. Epstein. I would just like to ask you personally and directly, do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein killed himself?
Are you asking him to speculate on how Mr. Epstein died?
I'm asking what the president thinks of.
So you're asking his opinion?
Mr. President, was your friend Jeffrey Epstein suicidal?
Are you classifying him as a friend who he has testified that he was
has
friendly?
called him a friend in a letter.
He said he was friendly, but not. You've asked for his testimony.
Mr. President, do you believe that Jeffrey Epstein was suicidal?
Do you know?
Was he ever
She's asking for the
suicidal?
best of your
I
understanding.
don't know. I only know what the medical finding was. I think maybe he finally got caught, and I don't know. I've accepted it in my own mind. I don't know what happened.
Mr. President, what did you accept? That he killed himself or that he did not?
But he did, but I don't know.
Yes, sir. Thank
And
you,
neither
Mr.
do you.
President.
We don't, none of us know. We weren't there.
Mr. President, it's been an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
So again, I think we might do a deeper dive into this testimony maybe in a future episode, but we wanted to get something out to you as soon as possible. But there you go, some highlights from the videotape depositions of both Bill and Hillary Clinton. And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. We're also up on NBC's Peacock as well. If you want to follow me, X, Instagram, my News Nation show, Jesse Weber Live, Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. Eastern. I'll see you next time, everybody.